All right, as promised, we're going to take a look at the follow-up lesson plan assignment. To access it, you would click on the syllabus, and I've already done that, so I'm going to pull it up here. And you will see the lesson plan assignment. It's called Reading Assessment Lesson Follow-Up. And this is the lesson that you're going to plan out for the student you assessed. So if you use the online case Caitlin Yar, then you would plan a lesson for her based on what you thought her greatest need was for, reading instruction. If the student was your own student, then you would do the same thing, but based on that student's needs. This is the rubric. Again, this is not a huge assignment, but for the first box here, you're going to need about a page. Again, this is a page of just narrative, where you pick an evidence-based practice, also sometimes called an intervention, and you describe it step by step. Or if it's not a step-by-step type of intervention, you can describe it holistically. And again, this needs to be an evidence-based practice or intervention for the area of need in reading for that student. So if the student has a decoding issue, you want to use a decoding or a phonics-based evidence-based practice. If their problem is comprehension, you want to use an evidence-based practice focused on comprehension. In this, it probably will be about a one-page narrative. You will have two parenthetical supports. So I recommend getting two studies, two journal articles, because they're very current. If not those, two different textbooks, not from this class. And I guess the last resort would be using a website that's a .org. Okay, so this first part, again, is just about a one-page narrative description of the evidence-based practice you're going to use in your lesson. And then this part here that says instructional plan, this is a typical kind of lesson plan. I put a template up and I'll show you where it is on Blackboard. The template is from internship. So if you're going to do internship, this will be the same active teaching model template for a lesson that you'll be asked to use. And basically, it's going to ask you to create an IEP goal for the student based on their performance in that the reading assessments you've given them. Then, you're not going to attack the whole goal during the lesson. You want to break that down to one instructional objective. Now, if the student is a student that accesses the general curriculum, you can use the SOLs for this piece, okay? Or an IEP goal based on an SOL. Then the other pieces of the lesson will look pretty typical to a lesson plan. What materials you will use. Then, how will you introduce the lesson? So, how will you connect it to previous learning that would naturally come before, and then begin your demonstration or your introduction of core content from the lesson you're going to teach. In your instruction piece, most special education lessons are set up in this way, and it's modeling, which we often call the I do part, guided practice, which is the we do, you do it with the student, and then independent practice. So you'll let the student practice on their own. You'd also include information about assessments or progress monitoring there. And the last piece is any adaptations, accommodations, modifications that you would include to help your student access that lesson better. Okay, because you can't assume it's just for your student. That would be a lesson they would, that would be delivered to them either in their special education classroom or perhaps a gen ed classroom with support. The last piece is you'll probably include this if you do some sort of assessment in the instruction piece, but you want to make sure you're very specific about how you're going to monitor students' progress on this specific lesson. Okay. You might have a bit of narrative here, and this can be a separate page after your lesson plan, where you discuss how you will progress monitor in an ongoing manner. Then also, how you will assess a student and how often, and then how you make your educational decisions based on your student's progress. And of course, you want to have nice and appropriate and very clear and readable lesson plan writing in terms of how you write and articulate your ideas. So there are points for that. So biggest points are for the core of the lesson, the instructional plan, but you have points for describing your practice, your evidence-based practice you're going to use in that particular lesson, as well as how you're going to monitor student progress, and then your actual writing itself. Now, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So where you access the syllabus under the syllabus tab, if you scroll down, there's the follow-up lesson plan template. So if you click on it, it's going to take my computer just a minute to open it up because my computer has been very slow. It'll have all the pieces that we just discussed in a format that most people find is pretty accessible to them. Some people don't like, a preset form to put their lesson in. So as long as you have all the pieces here in the rubric behind the blue box, you're fine. But again, this is just a little bit of a template to help guide your thinking. It has you put in some just really administrative things here, like number of students, subject and grade you would be teaching. Length of lesson, I would suggest to be about 45 minutes, which is about half of a typical block schedule high school lesson. And again, a typical period for an elementary instructional lesson. Approximate dates, again, these can be made up for dates, so approximate. Who's going to be teaching it, and what big idea are you trying to convey in this lesson? Then the rest of the pieces, you'll see a description of what we just talked about from the rubric. You'll see a goal, and again, this can be based on the SOLs, but also the student's IEP. Some specific objective information, so this should be a small piece of the goal. Any prerequisite skills that the student would need to have, or again, this piece with prerequisite skills, and then structuring the phase, which is in the introduction to the lesson, is where you tie to previous learning and you introduce the new concepts that'll be talked about and the new ideas. Then the active demonstration and practice of new concepts. This is moving to the modeling, guided practice, and then independent practice in the consolidation and overlearning phase. So just practicing so much that the student makes it their own. Follow-up is again progress monitoring and assessment activities can be in the form of homework or something at the end of a lesson to just monitor how much the student understood. I want you to be specific here. So it says evaluation plans. So how do you plan to not only evaluate the student, but then self-reflect and evaluate your lesson's effectiveness? Okay, so that'll be your very last piece. One thing you want to remember here is when you talk about the lesson itself, do not forget to put in accommodations and modifications that would be specifically appropriate for your student. So again, this is not a huge assignment. Your lesson plan here is about a page, and when you fill it in, it'll be approximately 2 pages. The beginning of the assignment, so I'm going to click back on the assignment itself. The beginning of the assignment will require about a page of narrative describing the evidence-based practice. Then you'll have your lesson plan, which is approximately 2 pages. And then you'll have some details about how you're going to monitor student progress, which may be about a page. Again, this paper is not a long paper, but it should be written in APA format. So if you cite outside sources, you do want to have an APA reference page, which you should have because you're going to have at least 2 sources here. If you base your lesson off of a lesson that you've modified from a website or something like that, you would also need to cite that website and source as well. Okay, you will be going over this, you'll be able to ask Kelly questions about this assignment on Monday in class. But again, I'm hoping that this has shared enough information that you feel like you can write this assignment. Just remember, it is based on the student that you assess for the reading assessment report. That's the key thing, and to pick just one area that you really think that student evidence need in. All right, if you have further questions, just email us and let us know or ask